So, welcome to this demonstration video. It's a demonstration video for the second part of the Body Workers training. The first part was 5 days of joint release, and this part is how can body workers learn to use their language skills, their voice, as another set of hands that's going to create more range and more effectiveness in their bodywork sessions. In my opinion, or in my experience, the voice has been an underdeveloped resource in bodywork trainings. I've done a number of trainings, craniosacral, Traeger, shiatsu, and we were encouraged in all of them to use our voice. But in all of those trainings, we never got the same level of skills learning with our voice as we did with our hands. So it's an area which to me is underdeveloped. It's waiting to be opened, it's waiting to be used by many people, and it will only benefit your sessions. Why not? When you're doing a bodywork session, it's a communication with the client, it's a communication about healing, about relaxation, whatever it is they've come to the session for. Why only use one channel? Why only use the kinesthetic touching channel? Why not use as many channels of communication as possible, and so open the doors to as many possibilities of healing that the client can get? Usually in a session there's two levels of communication. There's the surface level of communication. You know, the client comes in, tells you what they want, you tell them what the session is like. Hidden within this, the unconscious wisdom, the unconscious intelligence will be relentlessly communicating other messages, relentlessly communicating how it is holding the pattern of behavior, whether it's a bad back or migraines or whatever, how it is creating this. It will be giving so much information about this, and yet mostly it bypasses this unless you're trained to listen. Words are powerful. We know this. We say, when we listen to poetry, we say, I was touched. This is an interesting metaphor. I was touched by the words. And poetry and words can create physiological responses that are powerful. Love, passion, sadness, excitement, all these, laughter. And if words can create this, why not use it as a tool, as a method of creating healing physiological responses in your client? A client will come to you, and while they're telling you about their issue, there will be a number of overt or not so overt metaphors that they use. They may use something like, oh, I have a frozen shoulder. A great metaphor to work with. What would it need? Oh, to melt, to be warm, to flow. So you're already beginning to be able to use the patterning or the language of the unconscious. Or they might say, just in passing, they might say, well, on the one hand, you know, it's easy. Well, then you know that there's a split between on the one hand and the other hand. Usually a split happens down the midline like that. And you'll probably be able to see the physiological differences, or the expressions. They'll express one side of the problem with this side and perhaps another side of the problem with that side. But as soon as they say on the one hand, you know you've been given a very good map of their internal territory, and this will help you work. Other metaphors that they might use are more a little bit more subtle, not so easy. They might say they're overwhelmed, or they don't understand. Understand. Overwhelmed. Well, you know that it's about size and position. When somebody says, I don't understand, well, maybe you should stop lying down and stand up. Or maybe if it's overwhelmed, maybe if you felt bigger or saw things from above, it would be easier. So you're continually being given these metaphorical patterns, maps, implications that will show you where your client is. and which will allow you to bring language skills to help them resolve their problems. Some more examples of the power of language which you'll be meeting in this training is at the beginning of the session. First thing you might say, how can I help you? Simple statement, sounds easy, but actually within this statement, where does the power lie? Where have you framed the session at the very beginning for the power of this healing? Is it in the client? Is it in the technique? Or is it in you? How can I help you? You might want to rephrase it. What would you like to get from this session? This puts the power somewhere else. Or you might say to somebody, what's your problem? By saying what's your problem, you have linked at an identity level the problem and the person. It's yours, it belongs to you. This is a powerful viewpoint of your client. Whereas if you say, what's the problem? Feel the difference between these. What's your problem? And what's the problem? So if I say what's the problem, there's a tendency for it to be more objective. You can work with it. It's less subjective for the client, not so, it's a bit more, okay, it's the problem. If I change that one word again and I say, well, what's that problem? That tends to create even more distance. What's that problem? And by simply using these words, you create experiences in the client that make it easier for you to work with them and for them to work with themselves and for them to heal themselves. You could then go on to say, to use the example of what's that problem, you could begin to bring in the past, present and future, and you could begin to put the problem in the past rather than in the present and the future. And you could say, well, what has that problem been that you had? And you have managed to place that problem into the past, which leaves the future more free. The client may not even notice what you've done, and they'll start telling you about the problem, and you'll keep referring to it in the past, which leaves the future free to create the healing. So these are some of the little language skills that we will be working with. You know, it's like, how good have your techniques with your hands got? How good can you get your techniques with your language skills? It can make a huge difference in sessions, and it has done in my work and with clients. I think you will only benefit if you come and do this training. So come, you're welcome. It'll be great to see you. It's in Greece, November the 14th, in the autumn of this year. Okay.